undersized in the NBL at the Furphy, just with a spectacular under him, out of bounds play. Diamond side. Pelicans having a good couple of minutes. Look out!
The athleticism on full display. Jordan Poole is definitely one of the quickest to come off and shoot that thing.
Turnover, nice hands, Murphy.
That was some of the best of the NBA, NBL. What a historic weekend it was. The Pelicans in Melbourne. I was very jealous from afar. We're going to break that down. This is the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. Kane, Pitman and Olgun back together. Not in person like we were a couple of weeks ago in Melbourne, and I'm very upset about that, Olgs. But you were at those NBA games. I mentioned it was a historic weekend. I can't wait to kind of get the vibes of what it was feeling like inside Rod Laver Arena across the weekend. But we've also got plenty of NBL, and you could easily make the case that there wasn't enough hoops, Olgs, but we're going to talk Perth Wildcats, we're going to talk Sydney Kings, and of course we are going to talk about the officiating, which is always a big topic of conversation. But you and Ryan did a great job on this podcast last week. I was on a plane heading back to the US. I turned that bad boy on, and boy, oh boy, did it send me into a deep slumber. So thank you for that, Olgun Uluc.
Wow. First day back, and you're already throwing those shots at me. Look, I'm excited to dive into the NBA, NBL games, but it was very weird. I was sitting there watching, and in my mind, I'm thinking, it's an exhibition game. Like, who cares, right? But then it kept dawning on me that, man, like, people have been pushing for this for like 10, 15 years, like, get an NBA team to Australia, and everyone said it was impossible. So to be there when it happened, it finally happened, and there were so many obstacles that had to be crossed and leapt over for it to happen. So just to see it in person and to see the reaction of people, I took the tram into the games to see everyone's reactions was very, very cool. So I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah, we are certainly going to do that. And look, I heard you last week. You took that shot at me about the Geelong Cats, so I was going to get one back at you to start this podcast. You did a great job, though. Everyone loves talking to Ryan Broekhoff about hoops as well, so he was outstanding. I'm sure we're going to have him back throughout this season of hoops for sure. But let's talk about the biggest moments of the weekend. We have got some from the NBL as well, but you already pointed to it, and I got a little bit of a feel for it, and it was almost a little bit awkward leaving Australia 2 days before this historic moment, but I had to get back to work over here, and I was kind of curious what people were going to be saying about the Pelicans coming to town. And I must admit, I left the country pretty excited and also proud that everyone seemed to be buying into it. Everyone seemed to be so excited, whether it was, my mates that I was talking to, my mates' kids especially, that were getting involved in this, and perhaps even more so when I sat down with the league CEO, David Stevenson, around the idea that, half of the tickets that they sold for this thing was people and basketball fans that had never been to an NBL game before. So there was also the growth element there. I think there's some big question marks to come out of it. But I don't think, big picture, you can look at this as anything other than a big success. What were some of your big takeaways? And you can talk about what happened on the court. I don't think that was the most, I don't think that was the big story out of this weekend, but everyone is always going to be curious what comes next.
You know what? I will say this. Melbourne United made it very competitive. This was a 4 or 5 point game late in the fourth quarter. So credit to them, credit to Milton Doyle and to Dean Vickerman for keeping that as a game. The thing that stood out to me, and it's something that I don't really get a complete grasp of, is how many NBA fans there are in Australia. Not just Pelicans fans, and there were way more Pelicans fans than I realized. You'd walk around, you would see, CJ McCollum jerseys. You'd see old school Chris Paul Hornets jerseys. There are Pelicans fans that just exist all across Australia, and I didn't realize the extent of that. And then just NBA fans. We don't appreciate it as much because we're around the game a lot, right? We're around players a lot. We see these guys on the regular, whereas people in Australia, it's probably the first time that they're seeing an NBA player in person. And, thankfully the Pelicans did have someone like Zion, who's someone who I think transcends the sport a little bit. And it was good to see him quite locked in to all the media opportunities, all the fan opportunities. So the Pelicans seemingly bought into it. But then I spoke with Larry Kesterman, the owner of the NBL, about what's next. How do you make this a thing going forward? He told me that he'd be surprised if this didn't happen again. He'd be surprised if an NBA team didn't return to Australia at some point. But from everything we're told, it is all up to the NBA at this point on whether this happens again. There are teams, I'm told, that want to come over. They're signaling to the NBL and to people in the Australian basketball ecosystem that they want to come over, but it's up to the NBA. You know, why should NBA teams come over here? They can go to Abu Dhabi, and they can go to the Middle East, and they can go to China and make more money, and there's more opportunity for growth. There's less money in Australia. There's less opportunity for growth in Australia because they have Australia already. So what's the reason to come here? Is there a pathway through Australia to some of those Asian regions where there is growth? Maybe that's an opportunity, but it's up to the NBA to look at Australia and think, all right, why should we put a game there?
It's all about the money, and we understand that. It is always going to be the case. And to your point about Abu Dhabi, I mean, I'm sure if you asked the players where they'd rather go, they would say send me to Australia for, a week and a half. And we see teams all the time. You got teams up in Canada doing training camps. They're always going to funny places in that part of the world. But to me, and this is what I'm curious, what the fans of the NBL and basketball and people that are listening to this podcast, we always want more, as I pointed to. And I thought it was interesting that when I asked Dave Stevenson about, can we get 2 NBA teams out here? Because I think there's a cap. Look, it's cool seeing the NBA teams out there, and it's cool seeing them play NBL teams. But ultimately, we're going to want 2 NBA teams playing against each other. Maybe it's preseason to start, but then you want to get to regular season. We're seeing the NFL coming out for a game that actually means something. And maybe I am underestimating the fact that if you bring one NBA team out every preseason to play an NBL team, people will always be interested in that. But ultimately, I wonder, with the NBL being solely responsible, essentially, for bringing these teams out here with the relationship they build to the NBA, they're always going to want it to be against NBL teams. And I just wonder, how long that will be enough for basketball fans that always want more. So I don't know if you have any quick final thoughts on that, but that's the question for me. I thought it was great, but ultimately you want a game that means something, or at least 2 NBL teams.
So
NBA, of course.
For sure. So very quickly, I spoke to people about this exactly. The logistical and financial challenge of bringing 2 NBA teams over to Australia is so substantial that makes it's not impossible, but it's such a steep hill to climb. So that's very, very difficult to do. I'll say the Pelicans really enjoyed their time here. And again, it is just about convincing the NBA that this was a worthwhile opportunity for the Pelicans and that they got a lot out of it and that the NBA got a lot out of it. I think there's reason to think that they might do it again. But I don't think it's something that they're going to jump at again because there's so much money everywhere else.
Yep, it's a good point. And that was the big takeaway. Again, we look at it from a different lens, but I'm fascinated to see where that goes moving forward. Now, I'm also fascinated to see where the Sydney Kings go moving forward because as we talk about big moments from the weekend, for me, the Sydney Kings, they had to bounce back. They beat New Zealand. They win by 22 points. Maybe it wasn't the most exciting game of all time. They're 1-1. And I don't think we can jump at shadows this early in the season, Olgs. I personally, you can play 1 game, you can play 2 games. I think we need to see, minimum 6-7 games before we get, 2 up or 2 down on some of these teams. Yes, I just did that. But I do have a question about the rotation for you. I do have a question about the rotation for you. I was curious watching this game. I actually thought, as they're trying to figure out the Dellavedova, Kendric Davis relationship in the backcourt there, I thought some of their best moments on offense came when there was only one of those guys on the floor, and then Xavier Cooks fits into that as well. We know he's a real facilitator. So you get to the first quarter, Delly subs out with around 4 minutes to play. They really didn't play a lot on the floor together outside of the start of each half. And then Gorgon really quickly got into that rotation. So I just do think that it's a question mark on this team to flag. I think they'll figure it out. But I'm certainly watching those rotation patterns. I don't think it's easy for Gorgon to work through those and that Sydney Kings coaching staff. Both guys clearly at their best with the ball in their hands. And that's going to be a challenge for this team, trying to get everyone comfortable and happy in that rotation.
I think we figured we'd see this, that it would be those 2 starting together and then they'd be staggered, just as the point guard with different people around them. We had questions going into it on, Delhi's, the shooting of both guys. Can both play off the ball? I'm not entirely sure they can. On a consistent basis, right? They can do it in stretches, of course. The thing that's concerning me a little bit, and again, we're not overreacting to anything, right? It's been 2 games, one against Cairns, one against New Zealand. You don't overreact to anything like this. The fear is that this is sort of an extension of last season, where the offense looked a little bit sticky. And that scares me a little bit. Yes, Matthew Dellavedova is not going to shoot it at the low level he's been shooting it so far this season, over the first 2 games. When Kendric Davis gets the ball, it does feel like things stop a little bit. the ball stops a bit with him, and I think it ruins the flow of the team a bit. Yes, he's unbelievably talented, but there's a way to get him his scores more in the flow of things. And then I don't think Xavier Cooks is getting the usage that I think they need him to have. He's last season was his lowest usage since his rookie season. Over the first 2 games of this season, it's the lowest usage he's ever had in his career. There was a point at the end of the first quarter where they gave the ball to Xavier Cooks, and it looked like things were flowing a little bit better. So it's really just, there's a lot of talent on this team, and I think the shooting is so-so. So it's just about getting these guys to flow a little bit better, get more rhythm. It's very early, but the little indicators of maybe some of the issues from last season's offense are spilling into this season. Hopefully, Delhi can shoot a little bit better and the flow can get there. Because right now, again, it was a 20-point win. Credit to them for that, but the flow doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah, I mean, they scored 97 points. They only shot 33% from 3, so I'm probably less concerned than you are. I think Daly works well with a lot of those athletes, the role players they have off the bench. Davis and Cooks can dominate any team offensively, and Galloway only played 17 minutes, so they just have a lot of guys that they've got to work out this rotation and work through. I'm less concerned than you. They shoot 4 for 28 in the first game. Your offense and all the numbers are going to look horrific if you shoot that poorly. Knock down a few more threes. I think this team's going to be competitive. But Wednesday night against Melbourne United on ESPN on Disney+, check that out because that's going to be a big challenge for this team. Now, we're trialing a new segment here, and this is where we need the help of our fans. I'm going to keep saying it right throughout this podcast. NBL fans, I should say. We don't have fans. That is a mistake from me. You will never hear me say that. Listeners, NBL fans, get involved in the show on YouTube, the ESPN Australia YouTube channel, or X, our platforms on there. Jump on and let us know what you're thinking. And we need a better name. I've gone with What Is This? Now, the idea is that we pick out some things that stood out to us across the weekend in basketball. And I just don't think What Is This is the best name, Olgs. But anyway, Johnny Furphy, another massive dunk. This time, Jay Huff, his own teammate, was the victim. We've seen him do it in Summer League. We've seen him do it late in the regular season last year. And it begs the question, is this guy the best dunker Australia has seen at this level, certainly at the NBA level, because, man, he's got a highlight reel. He had another one today at the open practice as well. So Johnny Furphy, man, it's time to get excited about this young fella.
Yeah, the funniest thing about Johnny Furphy is when we both experienced this, speaking to him, which is you ask him, like, man, that was a great dunk, huh? And he'd just be like, yeah, it was all right. It was like a pretty good dunk. Like, it was just a dunk. And it's like, just, man, be proud of your athleticism. This is very incredible what you're doing. But when I went back to think of the best Australian dunkers, if you go a little bit further back, you got guys like Sam McKinnon, in-game dunker. Someone like Brad Newley, I think, has some interesting throwdowns over the years too. Go a little bit further. Andrew Bogut has some posters that I think are a little bit underrated. I wouldn't call him a great dunker, but like he's big and he was athletic in his prime. And then you go a little bit more recent. I think Josh Green is someone who we maybe underestimate as a dunker. There are a lot of posters in his repertoire. There's some dunk contests that he's participated in. And Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons in his athletic prime. There are some big throwdowns there. But I couldn't think of anybody who matches Johnny Furphy in the power, in the finesse, in the way he does it through contact. I don't think, and just how it looks aesthetically, it's beautiful. So I don't think there's a better Australian dunker than Johnny Furphy. And that dunk, man, he does a dunk in training camp and it goes viral. Like, that's how good he is.
Yeah, he's a really exciting player to watch. And as you can see, just over my shoulder, a little Johnny Furphy head. Someone left that on the floor at the NBA Finals, so I grabbed that and I said, I'm going to keep that. That's a nice little memento of Johnny Furphy, who, by the way, is still only 20 years old. Pacers in a weird spot. Tyrese Halliburton not going to be there this season. We suspect they've kind of already indicated they're not going to rush him back. And if you look at the guard and wing rotation, whether it is Neesmith and Matherin is there, and obviously Nemhard, and you look at the reserves, it looks like he's going to get minutes. And you mentioned being able to chat to him over the years. We were very fortunate over here that we saw him on draft night. That was a tough situation, but then we're at media day. We're at his first NBA minutes at MSG. We saw him throughout the season with the Pacers and then the NBA Finals, and he's always been excited. And everyone, whether you talk to Halliburton, Rick Carlisle, they're so excited about the development of this guy. So out of all the Aussie players, we're going to talk about the NBA a lot more on this show. Yeah, Johnny Furphy is a player to watch that we hope can crack the rotation and maybe play 15 to 20 minutes a night on a Pacers team that who knows? Rick Carlisle, he always gets the best out of these young players there. So that's Johnny Furphy. We're really excited about him. Now, what is this? I was, as I said, a little bit jealous watching those NBA games. with the Pelicans, and something caught my eye. And you go to the press conferences, and as a media member, I don't get to as many press conferences as I used to, and I love going there. And sometimes you ask a stupid question. Sometimes the coach gets a little bit shirty with you. But I was very fascinated by Willie Green saying that the Pelicans watched a ton of film on Melbourne United, and I just wanted to call that out. There's no chance they were watching a ton of film on Melbourne United. Come on, Ogs. Come on. He was being very polite, but they were not watching. They were not in the film room watching hours of Melbourne United. Why would they do that?
I have it on good authority that they watched some film, but by some film, that could very well just have been the ESPN mini on YouTube of the throwdown from a week and a half ago. That's probably the extent of what they watched. They probably had a good idea of like, hey, like Milton Doyle will probably go over that ball screen. Shea Illy maybe go under it. Maybe to that extent. But I agree with you. I don't think this team watched a ton of film on either team, and respectfully, they don't need to. They were more than likely going to handle their business as long as their starters played a half of basketball.
Hey, bit of fun with that one. We love it. Again, they had other things on their mind. They only had 5 days in Australia. I did like the work of Aaron Baines on the call. I thought he was good. He did point out, though, that also the nightlife was an attraction for this team. I don't think they were playing United, then reviewing the tape the next morning. They probably went out and enjoyed themselves. Melbourne is a very beautiful city. So shout out to the Pelicans for coming out. As you said, I think they made a lot of potential new fans along the way. They were great. One more that caught my attention. I was watching Tasmania Brisbane. We'll have a little bit more on this on the officiating later in this podcast. But Derek Rucker, now I couldn't find the audio to this, and it probably wasn't broadcast, but he referenced asking Scott Roth about pace, and I don't have the direct quote, so I'm not putting words in Scott Roth's mouth, but it sounded like they were saying that, Scott Roth was like, pace is overrated for people that potentially aren't fully up to speed with how the game is played. I don't really care about the comment itself or whatever, but it was a curiosity for me going through the numbers and the idea of pace, because we always hear it from the NBL that this is a league that is very similar to the NBA, and they will reference pace stats as some kind of way to prove, hey, look, if you like the NBA, you're definitely going to like the NBL. Now, I don't personally agree with that. I like the NBL because there's a bunch of different styles. There's a bunch of different offenses, and overall, the talent is awesome. I don't watch a game for the pace. What did you make of that? Because we have seen teams consistently that play different styles of basketball, different tempo, and ultimately have success, like those Tassie Jack Jumpers who were third slowest, if you care about pace in the league, and they won the whole damn thing.
All right, so 2 things. One, I don't think anyone has ever equated pace with being better at basketball. I think it doesn't matter how fast your team is. There's no corollary between how fast a team is and how good they are. That's not like a necessary connection that people make. I think what people say, quite rightly, is that a faster game is generally more enjoyable to watch. The NBL is an entertainment product. The NBA is an entertainment product. When people in the NBL say, look, we're fast like the NBA, it's because the NBA is enjoyable because they get up and down the floor. There's lots of dunks. And look, we're the NBL. We're like that too. That's what pace is. I feel like Scott Roth is just fighting demons at this point. There's no one, I don't think anyone legitimate in the basketball world is saying, hey, like a faster team is a better team. No legitimate person, I don't think, has ever said that. It's just pace is an important metric to use when contextualizing statistics and things like that, for sure. But no one legitimate has ever drawn a corollary between pace and how good a team is. Again, I feel like Scott Roth just loves like fighting ghosts because it's good to always be a contrarian about everything. But that's just the reality. And I agree with you. The reason we like the NBL is because it is a great mixture of the pace that we see in the NBA and also the more structured style of basketball that we see in FIBA basketball and international basketball. That's why the NBL is great, because you have a really cool mixture of both.
Yeah, I mean, you're part of this, to be clear, you are part of this media group that seems to be turning on Scott Roth now and turning him into this big evil guy. He's a little bit gruff. He's also won a title, and he's a head coach. They don't have to be nice all the time. And if he has this idea, because I do disagree with you, I completely disagree. I think that you hear it all the time. Early shot clock offense is good offense. And this has become out of the era of, well, there's so many three-point shots that are being taken. And Tassie just do it differently. So you can take a late shot clock shot if you want. But what you don't see with a lot of teams is their ability to run half-court offense. And the one thing I would say about Scott Roth is that he's always been able to get good shots and maximize guys taking shots that perhaps you don't see from other teams, including some of his star players this year. And we'll see if Johnson comes back, but we saw it, whether it was Starks, we've seen it with Tiger Campbell, who's been inefficient. They are willing to take shots from different areas on the floor. They are willing to move the ball to the second side, to the third side, and get a good-looking shot. Tassie doesn't necessarily, if you look at the shot charts, they don't take different shots by percentage. They only take 10% of their shots from the mid-range. The league average is at 9% so far this year. Obviously, it's only a very small sample size. It's not about that. They play a little bit slower because they generally run offense and get good looks. If they're turning the ball over defensively and getting live ball stops and then open looks down the other end, then that's different. You play with pace then when the opportunity presents itself. But I think that it is the case with some teams in the NBL that they don't have the ability to run a half-court offense because they probably don't have the guys that are well-suited to that. So that's where Tassie's a little bit different. And that's probably where Scott Roth gets a little maybe agitated if you equate pace with success. But I don't think he's jumping at shadows. I think you're a bit rough on my guy.
And I agree with you, and we'll get to Perth. But again, I think Scott Roth is a very good basketball coach, obviously, right? Demonstrably so. I think he's a really good basketball operator. Course, yeah. That is clear. And the reason why his offenses are so efficient is because I think he's such a good coach. But I just don't think anyone legitimate in the basketball world has equated pace with winning. I think pace is enjoyable. That's what the corollary is. And I think Scott's just mistaken.
So they had the second most efficient offense, just to finalize that point that you made there, because you are right. They have always been efficient, but they had the number 2 offensive rating in the year they won the title, even though they were technically the third slowest team. But ultimately, even when you talk about pace, and this is maybe where it's a little overrated, from the top team in the league to the bottom team in the league, you might literally be talking about 6 possessions per game. Now, I know that can equate to whatever, a number of points. But I don't think the difference is that big in the NBL that it really matters there. But I thought it was an interesting discussion either way. I'm still Team Scott Roth. I might be one of the only media members still there. I see he's getting barraged all over the place. I don't love it for my guy. But anyway, I think Tassie looked good to get the win over Brisbane. As I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, you referenced the Perth Wildcats, and this is just something to keep an eye on. So what are we keeping an eye on moving forward? And I think the Perth Wildcats are going to be that team. They've got a whole bunch of new pieces. What did you make really of the offense of this team in that win against Illawarra? It took them a while to get going, a pretty dominant third quarter. And then they were able to finish them off at home. In really, with the way Illawarra's looking shorthanded, a win they probably had to have, but they got it.
Yeah, the Dylan Windler usage continues to grow with each game, which I think is a positive. I think he's been their most consistent player outside of Joe Lalachua Jr. over the course of the start of the season. Them involving him more offensively, I think, has changed a lot for them. In their first game, they didn't do it, but since then, he's been terrific. I think there's still question marks on how effective Mason Jones is going to be game in and game out in this league. I think there's like the pace he plays with is a little bit diminished from what we've seen in the past from guards at the Wildcats. So I'm curious to see how he finds his footing, especially when the person next to him in the backcourt is not really defined, right? Right now we're seeing a lot of Jaron Riley minutes, and he's been terrific in his minutes, right? He's seemingly the only guard on that roster who can get them into their offense, and he's really solid defensively too. So he does it on both ends. The question is that going to win you a championship? Is Jaron Riley, as your primary point guard, going to win you a championship? Or is it worth trying to lean more into Ben Henschel, into Elijah Pepper and some of these guys and seeing if they can reach their ceiling? I feel like the only way for the Wildcats to reach their ceiling is to try to maximize those other dudes, because I think there is just a bit more talent there. The Jaron Riley stuff right now is really cool, and a lot of credit to him for the way he's playing, the way he's just stepped in and assumed a role that I think the Wildcats really need. But I think it hinders their ceiling of winning a championship if he's the guy that you're having to lean on.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing, I would say, such capable basketball at the moment, and this is a Wildcats team that, to me, I'm not too worried about him. I think that they will figure it out. I have got a little bit of a watch when you look historically at some of the star players the Wildcats have had, really, outside of Bryce, who was great no matter who he played for or what team he played for. He's just great in general. There have been some guys, and there are reasons that I'm not privy to from the outside, but you look at Pinder, slow to get going. Doolittle did not look like an offensive player until all of a sudden he did late this season. Windler really struggled last year. There was some health stuff there. So historically, this Wildcats team under really, the star players have really taken a while to get going. I don't know why that's the case. I don't even know if there's any correlation there. But you look at Mason Jones struggling to start the season. I don't even think JLA has looked at his best. And to me, you've got three guys with Doolittle, Mason Jones, JLA, throw in Windler there as well. Four guys that are all on the floor together trying to figure it out. The one point I'd make about Mason Jones, and I am not concerned about him in the slightest. I know people are concerned. He's not Bryce Cotton. That's fine. We flagged that from the start. He's going to be under pressure. That's just part and parcel. He's 4 for 20 from three so far in the season. And he has got a 5-year sample size of this guy's a 40+% three-point shooter. He's only played a couple of games. This is the NBL. People get so worked up about stats so early in the season and shooting percentages when it just doesn't matter. This guy is a shooter, and he is going to start to knock them down. And as soon as he does that, this will turn a little bit because to him, you look at it and you say, well, 65% of his shots are coming from three, but he was taking well over 50% of his field goal attempts from beyond the arc, even in the G League. This is kind of who he is. And I actually thought that he was moving the ball, making some nice passes in that second half, even if it didn't just equate to straight assists and straight buckets. So I actually thought there were some pretty good signs there. I think the Perth issues are far extended beyond just him. I think all the guys are trying to figure this out. And I thought the second half was a pretty good sign for them. I think it's a good point you make about really, and Henschel's the guy for me. They've got to find a way to get him going. It seems strange that he's coming off the bench, but they got so much talent that maybe that is going to be his role in this team. But we'll see with the Wildcats. Hey, what did you make? Final thoughts. I've teased this so much, so now I really need you to come with some fire. What did you think of the officiating late in this Brisbane-Tassie game? Brisbane fans, maybe rightfully so, they feel like they were robbed, playing severely shorthanded without a couple of really, really key players. Freeman Liberty and, of course, Casey Prather as well. What did you see with the controversial 2 calls, 1 non-call, 1 call offensive fouls in the last minute, 10 seconds of this game?
I thought it was pretty fearless. It just didn't feel like it was within like the flow of a game. It looked like a bunch of refs who hadn't ref basketball in a year. Basically, there was I just wanted. I think it's the thing we all want. We just want consistency, right? So I want the same call, the same amount of contact given on both sides. And so I feel like if you're going to have a no call on that Josh Bannon drive to the rim, which I'm fine with a no call there, then I think you have to give a similar no call to the Tyrell Harrison, shoulder into Will Magnay's chest, right? On with one dribble. I feel like that has to be the case. And the thing that not enough people talking about is that at the end of the game, where they inbounded the ball to Will Magnay, I thought Cal Dalton did a good job of sort of grabbing him and getting 2 hands on him when we know he's trying to foul because they're trying to extend the game. And the rest just didn't call it, let the jack jumpers throw the ball around. They got to free throw line with less than a second. Then they got to miss the second one on purpose and win the game. I think it sucked. I have sympathy for the Brisbane Bullets because they did everything they needed to in that game, right? Jalen Adams did his job. I thought the bench came on and did a really good job too. Tane Murray made shots. Alex Dukas made shots. There was that third quarter where Tristan Devers played really well and the bench extended that lead. Jack Purchase made shots. So I thought they did everything they could, being so undermanned without Casey Prather and Javon Freeman Liberty and Mitch Norton and Sam McDaniel. They're missing so many important pieces. I thought they did such a good job of being in that position, and for them to lose that game or not have an opportunity to win the game because of some calls that I thought were quite fearless, I felt sympathy for them after that one.
It was interesting. I just put a clip up again from that chat with David Stevenson, the league CEO, around officiating and what is the league doing to improve the standard, because I think most of us sit around and say that it's been poor for years, and fans have every right to be frustrated by the standard of officiating. And he's discussed more full-time refs and all types of different initiatives the league are doing. They're taking it seriously, no question about that. And it was a shame that was the first game that I watched this year. It felt like it happened every week last year. This was the first game I watched this year. I was like, damn, that might have just cost the team a win. And I'm with you. I thought they were both offensive fouls. That was my opinion. So I just would have called the first one, which was a little more egregious with the push-off from Josh Bannon there. And hopefully the Bullets, can continue to play with that level of effort and energy. I thought they were pretty good. They obviously deserve a win. So we'll look to see what the Bullets can do this week. But that's going to wrap it up, Olgs. And it is nice to be trying to get comfy back over here in the US. I miss home. It didn't help that there was NBA games on the weekend, but it was great to chat with you. And as I said right throughout this podcast, make sure you get involved in the show on the ESPN Australia YouTube pages, on both Olgun Uluc and my Twitter feeds, Instagram, whatever works. Give us the feedback, what you liked, what you didn't like. This was the ESPN Aussie Hoops Hour podcast. For myself, Kane Pitman, for that man, Olgun Uluc, breaking all the news at espn.com.au. We will see you all next week.